Imagine driving down a desolate highway in the dead of night, the only light coming from your headlights. You pull off for a quick break, but something's off about the pit stop ahead. What seems like a safe haven might just become your worst nightmare. Stay tuned for 3 horrifying pit stop stories that will make you think twice before taking that break on the road. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are diving into 3 terrifying pit stop horror stories to share. These stories are sure to make you rethink those lonely roadside breaks. Let's dive in. Story 1, The Mysterious Truck Stop, by Sam Mitchell. My name is Sam Mitchell, and there's one night on the road that I'll never forget. A night when I made a pit stop at a truck stop that seemed perfectly normal at first, but turned into something I never expected. I was driving down an old stretch of highway late one night, headed back home after a long haul. The road was desolate, the kind of place where the nearest town was miles away. My truck's fuel gauge was showing empty, and I could feel my eyelids getting heavy. That's when I saw it, a small, dimly lit truck stop off the side of the highway. It was the only sign of civilization for miles, so I decided to pull in and fuel up. The truck stop was old, really old. The lights flickered and buzzed, casting an eerie glow over the cracked pavement. The windows were grimy, and the station itself looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in decades. A small, rusted sign read Riverside Truck Stop. It looked deserted except for one lone pickup truck parked near the pumps. I didn't think much of it at first. I've stopped at my share of rundown places during long hauls, so I pulled up to a pump and got out to fill up. That's when I noticed the attendant, an older man, maybe in his late 60s, with a gaunt face and hollow eyes. He wore a faded uniform that looked like it hadn't been washed in years. I greeted him, but he didn't respond right away. He just stared at me with a strange intensity, as though he was sizing me up. I felt a little uncomfortable, but I figured it was just my tiredness getting the best of me. After I finished fueling up, I decided to grab a bottle of water from the small store inside. As I stepped into the store, I was hit with the smell of stale air and a musty odor that seemed to hang in the air like it had never been ventilated properly. The place looked like a ghost town. Old newspapers were stacked in a corner, and there was a dusty shelf lined with cans that probably hadn't been touched in years. I grabbed a bottle and walked to the counter to pay. But then I saw something strange. At the back of the store, there was a door that led down a narrow hallway. The door was cracked open just slightly, and in the dim light, I could see a shadow moving behind it. For a moment, I thought I saw someone standing there watching me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I walked toward the door, curiosity gnawing at me. But before I could reach for the handle, the attendant spoke. His voice was low and raspy, almost as if he had to force the words out. "You shouldn't go back there," he said, his eyes narrowing. I froze, feeling a chill run down my spine. His voice sent a wave of unease through me. I turned and looked at him, trying to make sense of his words, but his expression didn't change. It was as though he had said what he needed to say, and that was the end of it. I paid for the water quickly, not wanting to engage further, and made my way back to my truck. As I got in, I glanced back at the truck stop. The attendant was still watching me, standing in the doorway of the store, his eyes never leaving mine. I drove away, my heart racing, the truck stop growing smaller in my rearview mirror. But when I looked again just a minute later, the truck stop was gone. There was no sign of it, no building, no lights, just an empty stretch of road. I pulled over, staring out into the darkness, trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't explain it. To this day, I'm still haunted by the memory of that truck stop. No matter how many times I've driven that stretch of highway, I've never seen it again. Was it real or was it something else? All I know is that I'll never stop there again. Story 2, The Rest Stop from Hell, by Jason Collins. My name is Jason Collins, and I never thought I'd be telling this story. A few years ago, I stopped at a rest stop on the side of a remote highway, and what I saw there still haunts me. It was late at night, the kind of night where the only sounds were the hum of my truck's engine and the occasional creak of the tires as I drove through the dark, empty stretches of highway. I had been on the road for hours and was running low on fuel. That's when I saw a small, poorly lit rest area off to the side of the road. It was one of those places you'd pass by without a second thought if you weren't desperate, but I had no choice. I needed a break and a little fuel to get me through the next stretch of highway. I pulled in and parked. There was a single gas pump and a small convenience store, but there were no other vehicles around. It was as if the place had been abandoned, yet I knew it wasn't. The flickering lights of the store gave off an eerie glow, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as I stepped out of my truck. The air felt thick, heavy with an unnatural stillness, and there was something off about the place, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I walked into the convenience store, and the bell above the door jingled as I entered. The store was old, the shelves stocked with dusty cans and bags of chips that seemed untouched for years. There was a single fluorescent light flickering above the counter, casting strange shadows across the room. Behind the counter stood a woman, middle-aged, with pale skin and dark hollow eyes. Her hair was greasy and unkempt, and she barely acknowledged my presence when I walked in. I asked for a pack of cigarettes and some fuel, and she gave me a blank stare before going to the back to grab the fuel pump. As I stood there, something felt wrong. There was an odd smell in the air, like stale food and something else, something metallic. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself I was just tired from the long drive. But then I noticed something even more unsettling. There were no windows in the store, not a single one. It was as if I was trapped in this dark, claustrophobic space with no way out. When the woman returned with the fuel pump, she handed it to me without saying a word. I paid quickly, eager to leave. As I stepped out of the store and made my way to my truck, I glanced over my shoulder. The woman was standing in the doorway of the store, staring at me, her eyes wide and unblinking. I hurried into my truck, trying to shake off the creeping sense of dread. But as I started the engine and pulled away, I looked into my rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. At the far end of the rest stop, a dark figure standing next to a tree. It was tall, too tall for any normal person, and it was staring directly at me. My heart began to race as I sped down the highway, not daring to look back again. The next day, I passed by that rest stop again. I was curious, expecting to see a place that was just another lonely stop along the road. But when I got to the spot where I had parked the night before, there was nothing. No store, no fuel pump. No sign of the strange woman or the figure. The area was completely empty. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night. Was it all in my head? Or was there something far more sinister at play? All I know is that I never stopped at a rest stop again. Story 3, The Lost Driver, by Emily Davis. My name is Emily Davis, and what I experienced on that dark stretch of highway will stay with me forever. It all happened on a late-night drive when I was on my way to visit a friend in a small town about 3 hours away. I had been on the road for what felt like an eternity, the landscape blurring around me as I drove through miles of empty highway. The only sounds in my car were the hum of the tires and the occasional crackle from the radio. Around midnight, I noticed that my fuel gauge was running low. I hadn't seen a gas station for miles, and I started to feel a growing sense of unease. The night was so quiet, and the isolation was beginning to weigh on me. That's when I saw it, a sign for a gas station about 5 miles ahead. I breathed a sigh of relief, grateful that I wouldn't have to drive much further. As I pulled off the highway and onto the gravel road leading to the gas station, the only light was the flickering of a distant street lamp. The station looked old, rusted metal pumps and a single dim light inside the small building. There was no other car in sight. It was eerily quiet, but I was too tired to care. I just wanted to fill up and get back on the road. I parked next to the pump and stepped out of my car. The air was cold and still, and the only sound was the crunch of gravel beneath my feet. As I walked toward the pump, I noticed a man standing near the building. He was dressed in a thick jacket, his face partially obscured by a hood. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel him watching me. I hesitated for a moment, feeling a strange pull toward him, like something wasn't right. But I brushed it off, thinking it was just the isolation of the area playing tricks on my mind. "Can I help you?" I called out, my voice echoing in the emptiness. The man didn't respond. He simply stood there, his posture rigid, staring into the darkness. It was unsettling, but I figured he was just another traveler waiting for someone. I tried to ignore the strange feeling in my stomach as I began pumping gas. But as I filled my tank, I noticed something odd. The station's lights flickered, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw shadows moving behind the man. It was like something or someone was moving in the building, but the man remained still, not acknowledging anything around him. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I quickly finished fueling, making sure to keep my eyes on the man, but he didn't seem to notice. I hurried back to my car and started the engine, wanting nothing more than to leave the station as quickly as possible. As I pulled away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The man was still standing there watching me, his eyes now visible beneath the hood. They were wide, unblinking, and his face seemed different, almost inhuman. It was as if the longer I stared, the less real he became. I didn't stop until I reached my friend's house, and when I told her about the strange encounter, she looked at me like I was crazy. But the next morning, I decided to check out the gas station again. To my shock, there was nothing there. No station, no sign of the man. Just an empty stretch of road. It was like the place had never existed. Now, every time I drive through that part of the highway, I feel that same sense of dread. Was the man a ghost? Or had I stumbled upon something far more sinister? I'll never know for sure, but I've never stopped at a gas station at night since. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more creepy stories. Which of these stories gave you a chilling experience? Let us know. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are real.